I've always loved the Boundary Waters. It's a large wilderness area in between Minnesota and Canada, where the lakes stretch on for miles and the forests reach far past the horizon. The entire place seems out of this world. Towering islands, flowing rivers, brimming wildlife, and trails that seem to penetrate to the deepest of unknowns. Every year I head out to those waters, and every time I'm surprised by what I see. Some are just unusual: rock walls covered in moss, deep fissures, and abandoned mines. Some are inexplicable: a bird that calls at exactly 3 a.m. every night, large creatures swimming beneath the waves. But what I found this time struck me to my core. I took care to pack well. Motors aren't allowed Minnesota side, and they'd be too heavy to portage from lake to lake anyway. I had to pack what I could fit in my kayak, opting to use a hammock as a cover instead of a tent. The route I would be taking was far out of the way compared to other locations, and the boat launch only consisted of a gravel parking lot. The trip up to the first campsite was a long one, but luckily it wasn't windy. In order to get to the site, I had to pass through a lake, and then a chain of islands that led to where my campsite would be. It took about an hour to cross the lake, and I had to be careful around the archipelago, as I could easily get lost. One thing I noticed was that for some reason, all the islands around here had a lot more moss than what was usual. It seemed to engulf the forest floor, and I swear at some point I heard something walking around on one of them. I felt like I was being watched the entire time. Anyways, after a few dead ends, I was able to find my lake where the first camp would be. On the way, I stopped over a deeper portion of the lake and was able to hook a lake trout. That was nice. It didn't take long to set up camp. I just dragged my kayak onto shore and strung up my hammock. I also hoisted my food onto a rope, which I lifted up into a tree so the bears couldn't get at it. Although, like the islands before, this one seemed to be covered in moss, though I suppose that was better than sharp rocks like some other campsites I had stayed at. I decided to walk around on the island a little bit to try and find some firewood. It didn't take long to find a nice dead pine tree. I took my hatchet and broke off a few limbs, collecting an assortment of small sticks for tinder. It didn't take too long to start the fire. Pine wood is easy to light, and it was perfectly dry. I went to shore to try to catch some fish, maybe a walleye or a pike. I sat there, watching the evening sun close on the horizon, the red hues painting a nearby cliff scarlet. That's when I saw it. On top of the cliff in the distance, I could see the silhouette of a man. I hadn't seen any other cars at the boat launch, and I don't know who else could be out this far. I didn't end up catching anything, and I headed back to camp. I cooked the trout I had caught earlier for dinner, and I headed off to bed for the night. It was easy falling asleep, a soft breeze pushing against my hammock, swaying me to bed. I just closed my eyes, and when I awoke, it was the middle of the night. There was something walking around my campsite. My hammock was up in the tree to avoid bears, but when I shifted my head to where the noise was coming from, what I saw wasn't a bear. A tall, humanoid creature, completely covered in moss, was standing over my campfire. I didn't know what to do. I had never seen something like this before. I just stayed as still as I could, not letting out a single noise or breath. And just as quickly as I had woken up, it left. I didn't get much sleep that night, and when morning came, I packed up as quickly as I could. I didn't know what those things were, but I wasn't spending another night here with them to find out. It didn't take long. I got all my gear into the kayak and began paddling away from the island. I paddled as quickly as I could and exited the lake back into the archipelago. I decided to rest on one of the islands, and I went to the woods to relieve myself. The forest floor, like everything else in this place, was covered in moss. Just as I thought I found the right place, something grabbed my ankle. I looked down, and there I saw a moss-covered hand. That's when I noticed. All around me, heads poked out from underneath the moss blanketing the forest floor. I kicked off the hand and ran. I could hear their voices. "Come, join us underneath the moss. It's nice under here." And kept running through the woods. I eventually got back onto the kayak. I could hear them getting up to come after me. I immediately jumped in and started paddling away. I didn't look back until I got past the archipelago. Looking behind me, I saw them, standing at the edge of the island, watching me. It didn't take me long to get back to my car. I don't think I'm coming back to the Boundary Waters next year.